Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Last week we found some blueprints from World War II that mentioned a 40mm ammunition cupola. We found the weld marks that showed that at least a pair of those had been installed in the ship, but we had no idea what they looked like, how they worked, or if they were associated with all of our 40mm. Well, today we're back with more information. After doing a fair amount of research, we have discovered how many we had, where they were, and what was used in place of them. So, today we are at one of our 40mm guns. This mount, labeled in some blueprints as number 416, is one of 20 40mm mounts on the Battleship. They're all quadruple mounts like this one, and this one has been placed in its original position, here adjacent to the aft superstructure, just forward of turret number 3. The mount is not a standalone feature. It would have had a director associated with it, it would have had a gun tub built around it, and that gun tub would have had ready service ammunition racks inside of it. From those racks, say during a kamikaze attack, the crew who gets here can just immediately start passing ammunition to the gun. Many of the mounts then have further ammunition handling to get more ammo to the guns to keep them supplied throughout a battle. The 40mm gun is fed by a 4-round clip during World War II that is dropped in the feed trays at the top. Each of the 4 barrels has their own feed tray, and each of these guns can fire at about 120 to 180 rounds per minute, depending on how quickly those rounds can be fed into the guns. So while there's only 2 guys here cranking and shooting, there's another 9 guys around the gun just passing ammunition up and dropping it into the feed trays. So this thing can go through its ready service ammunition really quickly. Interestingly, many of the mounts on board have hoists associated with them that we didn't know about before, or some other ammunition passing structure, whether that's a window, a cupola, a hatch. We're going to go through all that in today's video. Some of them don't, and we've got a theory on that as well. I'm making a big deal that we're using specifically Mazora's blueprints and their logical numbering system for the 40mm guns because I've never seen a similar numbering system for New Jersey's, and there's a chance that it's not the same. The reason for that is Mazora's guns were all added during construction. 4 of New Jersey's, including this mount here behind me, were added later on. So there is a strong likelihood that she deploys for her shakedown cruise with the guns numbered 41 through 416, and then the 4 mounts that are added later just get the 417 to 420 numbers, as opposed to being numbered front to back, starboard to port. Potentially in the 1950s, when the ship is reactivated, they go through and they relabel all the guns, but it is unlikely that they would have changed the numbers of existing mounts when they added the new mounts. So there is a chance that our numbering scheme is not going to be the same as Mazora's throughout its career. But I'm going to use Mazora's because those are the blueprints we have, and it makes sense. So for today's video, we're going to go through each of the 20 mounts and where they're getting their ammunition from and what mechanism is being used to feed them. So now we're back at Mount 419, which is part of the after pair, the ones that are countersunk into the stern of the ship. These 2 were not part of the original design of the ship, but they were added during construction, and so they've got ammunition handling befitting that. Now, being countersunk into the stern of the ship here, there is no structure back here for ammunition to be passed through from. So the clipping rooms for these mounts are directly below us, port and starboard, on either side of what had been the aviation crane machinery room, which is now the Nixie counter-torpedo room. Because the ammunition is being passed up from down below, you don't just want there to be a hatch in the deck. One, real easy for water to go down that hatch. The Iowa-class battleships, especially at speed, will ship a tremendous amount of water, and so that rolls over the deck and could go down that hatch. Likewise, an explosion near this spot could send shrapnel down that hatch into the magazine. So these mounts have the closest thing to an intact cupola left. This welded plate right here is over what had been the original opening for the cupola, which is some sort of roller door mechanism, much like the powder for the 16-inch guns, such that ammunition can only be passed in one way, like an explosion up here can't go through to the magazine down below, because the roller door is preventing that. It also has a roof on it. And this structure right here, which also served as the base of the gunnery director for the 40mm gun, was the raised cupola. So you can see it's got that round bit, and then this part that comes over and connects to the mount. This part is where the actual roller door would be, opening into here. The round part is where the sailor would stand, who is receiving ammunition from down below, and then passing it forward through here to the guys in the mount. And then from here, I can take it and pass it directly to the guys at the gun, or pass it to where the shelves should be welded around the gun tub here, and they've all been cut off. So, next up, we're going to head down below and see what's left of these cupolas. So now we're directly below Mount 419 in some spaces that in the 1980s were the Chief Petty Officer's storage areas, but in the 1940s were the clipping rooms for the mounts up above. And this space is more or less mirrored on the other side of the ship. So for most of the mounts, we're only going to talk about one in each of the mirrored pairs. The exception there is the two turret top mounts. Probably were fed differently, so we'll talk about those separately. So you're getting 11 of the 20 mounts, with the other 9 being mirrored to the ones that we're showing you. So this stuff in the overhead is what is left of the cupola. This flat structure right here is actually a platform. We can remove this pelican hook clip, and there's a couple of safety pins in it. We pull those pins, and this will slide down, and it ends up being about here. So a sailor can step up into it, and now they're standing inside of the cupola. And somebody from down here grab ammo from the clipping room, pass it to the guy who's standing there, and then he passes it out through here. Now here you can see we've got a shelf and a curved roller and a handle that releases some part of this. Unfortunately, it's been partially cut up. We can see cut marks here, and partially welded secure. Probably when the gun was removed and they blanked over that bulkhead of the gun mount up above us. Here you can see the actual bulkhead of the gun mount where it's countersunk into the stern of the ship. So we don't really have something working to show you here. It'll be interesting to see if any of the battleships still in their World War II configurations have a similar thing like this, similar cupola. On New Jersey, less than 1/3 of our 40mm have this style. So there's a chance that the older battleships, Alabama, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Texas, that still have their 40mm guns, may have never even had cupolas associated with their guns. It might be a completely different setup on those ships. But we're reaching out to our counterparts to find out. Hopefully one of them has one that still functions, and we can do a video in the future that shows you how these things actually work. So, mounts 419 and 420 have cupolas. They have their handling rooms below them. Let's keep going and see what we can find out about the other mounts. Now we're at Mount 418, which had a 40mm gun on top of it. The setup was a little bit strange. Unlike the other guns where the directors are above and behind the mounts, the turret top mounts have the director at the forward end, basically at gun house level, and the guns themselves are raised a little bit above so that they fire over that director. To raise them, there is a square base. It's, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet tall, and you can see the remnants of the weld here in the armor where it was cut off. And then above that was it's kind of D-shaped tub. It's rounded on the front and the sides, but squared off at the back, much like the back plate of the turret itself. Previously, I believe that these mounts were unsupported. They didn't have any sort of handling room associated with them. Certainly no way to pass ammo up to them. The superstructure, there's a gap between the turret and that superstructure. There aren't any passing doors that feed aft here to the superstructure, so we don't believe that there's any clipping room specifically associated with this mount. However, check out this Missouri blueprint. You can see that it lists that space under the gun mount as being some sort of ammunition space. I have no idea how that works. There's no passage indicated where they're passing the ammo from there up or loading ammo into there, and it's not a large enough space for you to stand up in. It's maybe 4 feet tall at the most. So it's unclear how they get ammo out of that space to the gun up above. It makes sense in that there's no unused space. It's not just a 4 foot by 18 foot void, but it doesn't make sense in that it's not a big enough space for people to get inside of, and it can't really be fed all that well. Now, there is an ammunition space, a former ammunition space, below us on the main deck. It's used as the flight crash and rescue repair locker later on in the ship's career, but it was originally 40mm and 20mm magazines down there on the aft face of the superstructure. That may be where the ammo is coming from to get up here, but it's certainly where the ammo is going from to the mounts like 416 and 417 that we talked at earlier. This turret top mount was added while the ship was under construction. Those two mounts were added after the ship was completed for New Jersey and Iowa and during construction for Missouri and Wisconsin. There's a strong chance that because those are added after the ship is already in commission and when she's about to deploy to the Pacific, that they didn't go through all the trouble of putting in extra handling spaces, putting in a cupola, or anything like that. That's one theory as to why those are two of the 4 mounts that don't have clipping rooms associated with them, except possibly this one in the aft superstructure, which had been all 20mm ammunition, and then during that switchover, half of it's taken over for 40mm. But it doesn't seem like enough space to feed 3 mounts, the turret top mount here and those 2 wing mounts. The other theory is because these 2 mounts and the other 2 are all main deck level mounts. And so again, they're not only main deck level, but they're in parts of the ship that ship a tremendous amount of water. That the other ones at the bow, water comes over, that could easily run down there. Here, you're at the point where the wave break comes onto the deck, especially at high speed when the stern drops down some. It's just before the stern of the ship starts to curve back up a little bit. So these are wet parts of the ship. It doesn't make sense to have a cupola for water, for shells coming up from down below. Plus that entails cutting a hole in the 1.5-inch thick deck to install it after the ship has already been placed in commission. But again, Missouri and Wisconsin do get these mounts during construction, and they don't seem to have any sort of cupola. So we don't have a definite answer on why 4 of the ship's 20 mounts are definitely not fed from anywhere, and the turret top mounts, it's dubious whether or not they're fed from anywhere. Let's go check out the mounts at the aft end of the superstructure. At the extreme aft end of the superstructure here on the O2 level, there was on each side, port and starboard, a 40mm mount. These were 414 and 415. So we're on the starboard side where 415 would have been. During the 80s missile conversion, they expanded this part of the superstructure, so what was once exterior is now a passageway on the inside of the ship. However, they never blanked over the old 40mm passing ports from the clipping room on the other side of this bulkhead to the mounts here where it would have been exterior. So this is just a door that can be opened or closed. Closed when not in use, opened when you're actively passing ammunition through. And this style of square door is the most common way for ammunition to be passed on the ship for the 40mm guns. So we've got 4 mounts that don't have anything definitely. We've got the 2 turret top mounts that still confuse us. we've got 6 mounts that have cupolas, and now this is the other type of passing port, the horizontal as opposed to vertical style of passing port, and this shows up on 8 of the mounts. So now we're up inside of the magazine for the that triple stack that's around the aft funnel that is added during construction on the Iowa-class battleships. These spaces have 2 clipping rooms associated with them. One is feeding all 3 mounts on the starboard side. The other one's feeding all 3 on the port side. We're on the port side right now. So all the ammunition is in here in shelves. You're pulling it off of the racks, and it's being passed through doors like these to go to the guns out on the side. This is the forwardmost mount. If you look behind the camera over there, you can see the mount that's feeding aft behind that 1980s air conditioner. Obviously, we didn't have 40 millimeters in the 80s, so these spaces were repurposed at that time. In addition to these 2 horizontal passing ports, there was also a cupola that fed the gun that's directly on top of this position. The blueprints, look at these Missouri blueprints from 1950, they show not that normal, like almost D-shaped, half-circle, half-square-shaped cupola that the other cupolas have. It shows more of a rectangular opening, so that may well be these weld marks in the overhead above us. There is a matching set on the other side, but this is kind of in the middle of where that mount would have been. So it's just as likely that this is where all the power for that particular mount and the foundation came through into this space. And it's actually weld marks back here that would be the remnants of the cupola. Regardless, the blueprints list these 2 mounts as having cupolas. Now we're up at what in the 80s was mount 22, one of the forward phalanx mounts, the one on the port side, but it's placed directly where an older 40 millimeter mount had been. Check out the round radius weld mark there from where the gun tub used to be up here on the 05 level of the superstructure just after the bridge. Back when mounts 46 and 47 were up here, they were fed via the clipping room on the other side of this bulkhead. You can see the remnants of the door welded over here. There's a similar door on the opposite side of the ship. Interestingly, these are the only ones of those doors that do get removed and blanked over. The other 6 of the 8 are all still in place. But this space gets converted from a magazine space into the local control center for the forward phalanx guns. So there's some computer equipment in there and the remote control joysticks for taking these over where they're not slaved to the computer and just engaging whatever they want. So they sealed this space up. Now we're up on the 01 level forward near the captain's cabin where mounts 44 and 45 are. And those are the ones that set off this whole quest last week when we found the remnants of the cupolas for feeding them ammunition from down below. Now, that confused me greatly because it means that the cupolas are passing the ammo up from the wardroom to up here when there's a 40 millimeter clipping room right up here in the base of the conning tower, not that far from the gun mount. Now, what demystified me about this is this particular 40 millimeter clipping room only has a door here on the starboard side. There is no matching door or weld marks from where one was obliterated on the port side. So that leads me to believe that the ammunition in here is being passed up to mount 43 on top of turret number 2. So you've got a clipping room down below that feeds up for this side, you've got a clipping room down below that feeds up from that side, and you've got a clipping room here that's feeding up to the gun up above. That is my best guess about why you've got 3 different passing ports for these guns here. It doesn't make perfect sense. Why is the window only on the starboard side? Why isn't it on the forward face? There's no ladder on the back face of turret 2, so how are they actually getting it from here up there anyway? You got to run down to the side of the turret and then up the ladder. and then you're in front of the mount and you got to pass it from there, and it still doesn't answer what those square structures that are listed as ammunition handling rooms that are underneath of the turret top mounts, what they actually had in them. We just know that they don't penetrate through the 7-inch armored deck or 7.25-inch armored deck through the roof of the turret into the turret down below. And there's of course no 40mm handling equipment in the turrets themselves, just some electrical equipment that powers the mount up above. So now we're all the way at the bow in what is now a forward berthing compartment. And you know what? It was that during World War II as well. However, shortly after commissioning, they converted this general area here behind me, which now has bunks in it also. It had been a 20mm clipping room for filling 20mm drum magazines to pass up to the 5 guns that were in the weird teardrop shaped mount up there. Those get replaced in mid-1943 with a pair of 40mm guns, which on Missouri are called mounts 41 and 42. On New Jersey, they might be 416 and 417. We're not entirely sure, but they're 2 of the last ones added. Here is another mystifying space. We know the magazine is down here. We know the guns are up there. At other mounts like this with the magazines below them, you would have a cupola. There is no cupola here. However, there is evidence of a hatch, and these blueprints from Missouri make it look like it's a regular personnel hatch, except square. And sure enough, we've got a weld mark in the overhead that shows that. So my best guess is they would refresh those mounts, ready service ammunition, from the clipping room down here. And there would probably be a ladder going up that, and a sailor would be halfway up the ladder and just passing things to the guy up above. That might be like this classic picture of Alaska, which was built right here in Camden, where there's a sailor from up above reaching down through a regular scuttle in the deck to receive the ammo. So there's a strong chance that this is a different type. I'm not going to rule out the chance that it could have been some sort of mechanical hoist, a dredger hoist or something like that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And especially given that these mounts are at the bow of the ship, where we are shipping a tremendous amount of water, you wouldn't want any sort of opening there that would allow the water down. So I have a strong suspicion that this hatch would have been normally dogged, especially in combat, but then after each wave of the attack, as they needed to, they could open the hatch, quickly pass up a couple of clips to a guy reaching through the overhead, and then dog the hatch down again. In reality, air attacks on this ship are not constant all-day affairs. They're sporadic with individual or groups of aircraft coming in, and for a 5 or 10 or 15-minute period of time, that aircraft is being engaged, or that flight of aircraft is being engaged, and then there's a downtime. So it is possible to refresh these mounts kind of outside of combat. But it is also interesting that the 4 mounts that are added last, the post-construction mounts, have the worst ammunition handling compared to the ones that are designed into the ship from the beginning, the ones up in the superstructure, and the ones that are added while the ship is under construction. So what do you think? It's obvious to us now that they should be adding anti-aircraft guns on every available piece of deck space. But did you think about how much space it requires for the power for those mounts, for the directors for those mounts, and for the magazines that are feeding those mounts? Let us know in the comments section down below if you think that the Iowa-class battleships actually got too many mounts. If the last 4 aren't being adequately fed with ammunition because they didn't have magazines designed into the ship, were they actually any good, especially since they were mounted so low and therefore had less arc of fire, had less success against torpedo planes, that sort of stuff? Let us know in the comments section down below. Or do you think the Navy was right and more guns is always better? Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of sponsors and private individuals. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.